So hello, welcome to Road Rat HQ. This is where the magic happens, man.
It is, yeah, a lot of magic.
Many magics.
The
These are the magicians.
This is where the magic happens.
Yeah, so this is where we make our magazine.
Yep.
Road Rat. And over here we have Mikey, our editor, and Rupert, who's our art director. And and between the three of us, this is the kind of skeleton.
So you create that from this. That's ridiculous. That's amazing. That is actually, when you say that is actually amazing.
There's a lot, there's a lot of other people that are involved.
I'm sure.
But
we're
the kind of on a day-to-day basis. We're in here and kind of discussing and pushing ideas around on the computer and boxing up, putting stickers on and sending.
So if you're a subscriber to Road Rat, oftentimes it's hand-picked by Guy himself.
And hand-stickered.
Yeah. Cool. It just so happens that it's conveniently above your garage.
It is, yeah. It's so downstairs we have the cars, upstairs we talk about cars, we make magazines about cars. So this is very much an auto-themed barn.
I've only been here twice, and I've come back today, and there's more cars that I haven't seen before.
There's always a bit of a rotation going on, as cars break down and get sent away. New ones get fixed and come back in. So there is always kind of a healthy rotation of cars.
I reckon we head downstairs and look at said a rotation of cars. Let's do it.
Yeah, was that short then?
As I walk in here, we've just walked past countless classic cars. This to me stands out like a bit of a sore thumb, man. What was the reason behind the Veyron amongst all of the true classics?
It's strange. It's definitely, it's the odd one out here, isn't it? By a country mile.
By about 40 years.
But I think, to me this is a classic car. It was such a game changer, when it came out. If you think about when the E-Type was introduced in 1961, that was a kind of a game-changing car. Or when you think about the Miura, kind of in the 70s, and maybe the F40. Yeah. And then there was the McLaren F1. I think this is the kind of natural successor to that chain of sort of game-changing cars. And I think it's a beautiful car.
It's stunning, isn't it?
It's not really a sports car. It's not really a Grand Tourer.
That is the weird thing about this car. Where does it fit? Because actually, 2 Grand Touring it is actually quite nice. But to put any bags in, there isn't any space at all, is there?
But even to go long distances, it's not great because it's a pretty noisy car. These wheels are so fat.
Yes.
The road noise you get inside the cabin.
And these had very early run flaps on, didn't they?
But I think what attracted me to this car was just from an engineering point of view as a concept. Ferdinand Piëch wanted to create a car which had 1,001 horsepower and yet was docile enough to drive him to the opera.
Yeah.
And he sort of achieved it, and it's sort of good for that and not much else.
As far as design briefs go, it's
an unusual one. So I think at certain points in history, the Germans have kind of wanted to just stamp their authority on kind of engineering prowess, and I think this car really represents that sense of engineering achievement that the Germans are so good at.
Well, this had a very early but quite advanced twin clutch box in it. So one of the sort of pitfalls really of a twin clutch gearbox is that they were never that great at dealing with torque. Yeah. And then Bugatti came out with this, and everyone was like, oh, it can be done and it can be driven seamlessly and smoothly. And actually the development of this ultimately eventually made its way into a Golf.
Right, so they're kind of benefiting from the extraordinary cost that it costs per unit to make each of these, and like you say, the power is very progressive. You can drive this to Tesco's quite comfortably, and put a few bags.
Not that you can. As long as you don't have a passenger, you can bring some bags home.
Exactly. And I have done that.
Have you really? Brilliant.
Yeah. I think. For me, it's one of these cars which came along, and even if you don't have any interest in cars whatsoever, you probably know what this car is.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot of attention, which I don't love, but I do think this car has a kind of an elegance to it in a way that a lot of these kind of super hypercars don't have. I mean, the shape of it, I think, is beautiful.
It is.
The surfaces are lovely, and it's not too crazy in terms of all the aerodynamic kind of, bits of carbon fibre everywhere.
I think as well, what will make this special in the long run is that even though the Chiron has moved things on, the actual underpinnings and foundation of that car isn't dramatically different from this is very much the foundational car. In time to come, when they're as old as these cars, which we shall speak about shortly, it was just odd walking in here. I was like, all of these classics, and then Veyron at the end. So.
Well, I think it's a modern day classic, you know, and there's been a lot of research that's gone into this. I mean, Delara did the chassis work on this, and it really handles, you know, it drives very well, it's very comfortable, albeit a bit noisy.
Yeah.
It's a heavy car.
Yes.
You know, so that, you know, but to be honest, you wouldn't want to have that much power in a car much lighter.
No, I bet. Well, I was speaking with Andy Wallace, and he was saying actually the weight is in its favour, oddly, because it helps with traction, you know?
Yeah, it does, and you need a lot of traction to deliver that power through the wheels.
Yeah. How open are you to driving this car one day? Because it just so happens I've started this Modern Classics series, and I'm sure a Veyron would be great.
Let's do it.
You've heard it here first. Let's do it. Okay, cool. Right then, now this is really where my knowledge bank almost ends when it comes to the rest of your room. I mean, I'm aware there's some very special stuff, particularly that Zagato Speedster. Is the engine back in that Porsche?
No, it's not, but we can still talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the engineless Porsche.
So this is my Porsche 914-6.
And so the sixes are the rarer.
So that is to say that Porsche introduced a 4-cylinder 914 car, but they did a variant, which was the 914-6, which had the engine from the 911 in there. And unusually, I mean, what's kind of fundamentally different about this car to the 911 is the engine. This is a mid-engine car. Behind the wheels to in front of the wheels, which ultimately gave the car
much
a
better
sense of weight distribution. And this was a car which was kind of being led by Ferdinand Piëch, who was responsible for the Veyron. So there's a kind of there's a strange link between these two cars.
I mean, you really wouldn't think it, would you?
No, you wouldn't think it at all. But so he was kind of behind this car as well. So they raced these cars, the 914-6s. They put it into Le Mans. And it won its class straight away, and it came 6th overall in the race, only being beaten by the 917s and the 512s. So,
which is acceptable if you're going to be beaten
by
something.
Which is pretty acceptable.
So you've done Tour Auto in
Tour Auto, yeah.
How was that?
It was great.
Good?
It was great. And I mean, Porsches are just reliable cars, and they tend to get you from A to B. But what's sort of unusual about this car is the 914s were a joint project between Volkswagen and Porsche, and they sold.
It doesn't look like a Porsche.
It doesn't really look like a Porsche, and that was quite deliberate because Porsche didn't want this to kind of cut into their 911 sales.
Interesting.
But the trouble they had was the Volkswagen people felt it was. They felt it's a Porsche. They felt it was a bit too extravagant.
Yeah.
And the Porsche people didn't love it because they felt, it's a Volkswagen. So it kind of fell in this strange gap between the two brands, even though they sold quite a lot of the 4-cylinder cars.
Yeah. So how hard was it to track down a 6? Because they made a lot less of the 6-cylinder cars, right?
I think the 914-6 is probably one of the rarest production Porsches.
Yeah.
And in fact, I believe the 914-6 was made in the Porsche factory.
Was
and
it?
The 914-4s were, I think, made in Volkswagen.
Wow.
So these are quite rare. I think there's maybe only made about 3,000 of them. This is a 914-6 in GT spec, which means it's got a slightly hotter engine. It's got lightweight closing panels. It's got these kind of wheel arches.
Slightly flat.
So you've got sort of slightly bigger tyres on there.
If they upgrade the brakes, would they have a more poke?
Well, I think most people kind of would put 911S brakes on them.
Yeah.
And in fact, the factory made a handful of 914-6 GT cars to go racing. Yeah. But the way that they got the car homologated for racing was they sold customer kits. So if you had a 914-6, you could buy a kit from Porsche and fit all of this stuff stuff to your car.
That's pretty cool.
And that's what ultimately I think made up the numbers required for the car to be homologated.
Does it feel anything like a Porsche, even though it doesn't look like one?
Yeah, it does. It's got the great sort of.
Because
I mean,
when you're in
911s,
it,
they steer so well. And
Yeah.
this car steers really well. You've obviously got that, very characteristic Porsche engine sound.
and it has a 911 dash.
Yeah, I mean,
Which is cool.
it's using 911 parts and,
Yeah.
and everything's from that same world, but it's just a different, different tub and different body, essentially.
So what was it that made you want one of these?
It was eligible
Yeah.
for a lot of stuff like Tour
Sure.
Auto, so it's a relatively affordable way of getting into sort of historic racing.
Yeah.
Porsche engines, we can rebuild them here, so you don't need to kind of go to a crazy expensive, engine builder.
Yeah.
You can buy piston and cylinder kits and just rebuild
Yeah.
the whole thing at home, essentially.
In complete contrast to this. Yes.
Another Porsche.
Yeah. So, I mean, your idea of rare was around 3,000
Yes.
of these.
Yes.
In contrast to that,
This is even rarer.
this is even rarer. How many of these did they make, Guy?
They made 9. Well, actually, no, that's not true. They made 1.
They made one.
So this is a Zagato-bodied Porsche. It's a 356,
Yes.
essentially. And there was a French racing driver called Claude Storres, who raced quite a lot of Porsches in the 50s. And he commissioned Zagato to make him a speedster from a 356 Carrera. And so Zagato built him essentially this car to go racing in. Unfortunately, I think in his second race, he decided to put some slightly bigger wheels on the car. But I think it was a high-speed circuit, maybe a lot of straights. So he wanted to get more top speed out of the car.
Yeah.
So he put on bigger wheels essentially before the race. And when the race started, he went into the first corner, turned the wheel, and the wheel was too big.
So it's
So
scrubbed the arch,
it hit the bodywork and it flipped him over. And tragically, he was killed in that accident.
Yeah.
The car was taken away from the racetrack somewhere in France, I can't remember which one, and has literally never been seen since. Nobody knows what happened to that car. So this was essentially a one-off car in the 50s which disappeared.
Crikey.
And a few years ago, Zagato decided, as a kind of tribute to Cloud and to the car, that they would sanction 9 cars to be rebuilt. So they built 9 of these. The car originally had these kind of red fins on the back here, which I didn't particularly like the look of. So I asked Zagato when they built my car to take those off. So
That's interesting. And they were like, yeah, cool. Or
I don't know if they had
like
any function. I
No.
think, whether they were for some sort of high-speed stability or
key or something.
it was the 1950s. It was kind
Yeah.
of, it was the jet age,
Yes,
and maybe
cool.
it was just
Yeah,
a kind of a
design
design
thing
flair.
then. Yeah, I'm sure. So how did you catch wind that they were making 9 of these? Because it sounds like it's a very invite-only sort of project.
So I'm a huge Zagato fan. I think they're my favourite coach builder, and I was visiting the factory just outside Milan, and I caught wind of it there and immediately said, "Can I have one?" And they had some spaces free, so
Wow.
so luckily
Right place, right time.
I got into the project at the right time.
Sensational.
This doesn't have the Carrera engine, so the way you do it is you have to buy a donor car. So I bought 356A,
Right.
so it's the right period, and they take the body off and they strip it down to the rolling chassis. This still has the standard 356 engine in there, because if I wanted to put a Carrera engine in there, it would just cost an unbelievable amount of money. They're very rare
that
engines.
era. I was going to say,
Yeah, there's not many of them.
That's pretty hard to find.
And they're notoriously difficult to rebuild,
Right.
the 4-cam engines.
Wow.
Plus, you don't really want too much power in a car like this. This aluminium is paper thin,
Yeah.
so you don't
need
really want to be going that fast.
No. So I remember last time I was here, you told me a story that you actually did a road trip in this open top, and it absolutely poured down.
Yeah, so I collected this car from the factory
Yeah.
with my friend Mags, and we drove it from Zagato up through the lakes, across to Chamonix, and then we drove it all the way down the Alps, down to Nice. And I don't think it stopped raining once.
So we would get a little bucket to throw the water out?
We would get to hotels. It was about a 3 or 4 day road trip.
Yeah.
We would get to hotels in the evening and literally ask them for a bucket.
Oh really? I was joking, but
no, we actually did. So we'd have to get a bucket to bail the car out of water, and then ask for about 20 towels to kind of like sop up the rest of the water.
So no comments about a man that doesn't use his cars. He's got some dirt on his Veyron. You've autoed this, and you turned that into a canoe.
It's a canoe.
Yeah,
it is a canoe. We were so disappointed to see that the weather wasn't going to be good.
I bet you were.
But actually, the rain and the lightning striking around us just turned it into one of the most memorable road trips I think I've ever had.
Fantastic. That's what these things are all about, man.
You've just got to get out and use them, come rain or shine.
Absolutely.
And you can't sort of be too precious about cars because they're cars, and you need to drive them.
Albeit quite a special 1 of 9 open-topped car.
Yeah,
in the wet. Good lad. All right.
So I think generally I like cars from the 1960s. I think that's for me that's the kind of sweet spot of design. I like the form of cars from the 1960s. They were just curvaceous and they were all drawn by hand, and there's nothing looks like it was designed on a computer. And they all show a real kind of expression from the designers. I think cars nowadays, they kind of sort of tend to look
I know
quite
exactly
similar.
what you mean, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of them, these didn't exactly follow a wind tunnel, did they?
There wasn't much wind tunnel testing.
They were just like, this is a nice line, let's panel beat that.
Yeah, I think they designed cars to be aerodynamic by just looking at the drawings, basically.
Yeah.
But of course, there wasn't the kind of power or speeds that required downforce or anything that everybody talks about now.
When we go next door, this keeps going. The Serene is.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of aesthetic beauty and just styling, I know it's a cliche to say they don't make them like that anymore. Wait until you see this thing next door; it's out of this world. Speaking of which, is this the Maserati era SM?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
This is a cool story.
So this is probably about the most French car that just kind of exists. It's a Citroen SM. I suppose it's the spiritual son of the Citroen DS.
Yes.
Which was a revolutionary car in the 1950s. I think it was revealed in 1955, the DS, and people just didn't know what it was.
This thing had air ride and all sorts of stuff, right?
That's right. The suspension was a very kind of complex system. And then at a certain point in time, for one reason or another, Citroen ended up acquiring Maserati, who were not doing so well in a business sense. So what they did was they were designing this car. They acquired Maserati, and they put the V6 Maserati engine into this car. So it's full of this amazing kind of French technology. It's got lights that turn with the steering wheel. It's got this kind of pneumatic suspension. When you turn the engine on, the
whole thing rises up,
lifts up, and you can adjust that up and down depending on what you're
That's
doing.
advanced.
So if you're going down, if you're going across Germany on a kind of a long motorway or something, you can drop the suspension right down, and that's sort of more aerodynamic.
Yeah.
Or if you're going on a country lane around here, you can just pump the thing up, and it's kind of like a 4x4
mad thing
kind of car.
Very
I love
cool.
this. This is probably my favourite car for cruising long distances, long road trips in, because it's just so comfortable.
Well, the interior, let's just go and check out the interior on this thing. I mean, it's like this sort of smoker's lounge. It's like almost, I wouldn't go so far as to say Art Deco, because I know it's not that era, but there are some definite styling cues.
Well,
Just look at that.
It's like tobacco, isn't it? It's kind of.
It's amazing. What a thing.
And you've got to believe people were smoking
For sure.
Gauloise and all those
Big fan,
French
man.
cigarettes in there.
I've got to sit in that, man. That
sit
is.
in there.
I mean, this is one of the, I guess, benefits of I mean, for example, the A pillars are like matchsticks, so you've got this incredible view. But because the seats aren't full of memory functions and airbags, it's just a good seat. It's just like a comfortable, gorgeous seat.
Yeah.
It's stunning, isn't it? That gear selector, man.
It's beautiful, isn't
It's
it?
so
It's like a piece of art in itself.
Yeah, and I love how there is a literal radio sunk into the central console.
It doesn't sound very good.
I'm sure.
But it looks cool.
But it looks the real deal.
And as you say, the seats, you know, I feel people have forgotten that seats are supposed to be comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, when you get in all of these kind of souped up AMG kind of sports cars, it's like the seats are so hard.
Yeah. I think it's a combo of both having to provide lateral support because the performance of these cars is now crazy.
Yeah.
But all of the safety features that we have to have inbuilt, and then on top of that, they have to compete with the next guy who's got. I mean, the Bentley that I've driven here in will massage you, it will heat you, and it will cool you, and it has airbags in, and I think it has a 26-way adjustable seat. So how can that be? Like, I mean, you're sitting on plenty of stuff there.
How is the massage function on that? Does it work?
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's one of the better ones. Like the early ones were kind of like a little hamster padding your back, but this has got some proper. You know, it's good. It's pretty good going.
I feel if I had that function, I would just have it on
all the time. All the time. Yeah. No, it's good. Whereas this feels like an Eames chair in your car.
Yeah,
it's cool.
It's super comfortable.
Yeah. It's
in
awesome.
fact, I mean, I'm kind of, you know, seeing you sitting there now, I feel that we should probably maybe switch out the Porsche for this on the
right?
on the road trip,
because that would be chill.
It would just be so much more chilled.
We have a pretty substantial road trip coming up. We haven't finalised the car yet, have we?
I'm sure it's changed. This could be a good option for
It could be, right? It'd be hilariously cool.
I think we'd be so much more
relaxed. What's it like when you show it a corner? Is it alright?
You have to tell it a corner is coming about 3 minutes before you get there.
Set it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Handfuls of wheel. It's like,
but that's why it's so comfortable. You know, it's just a cruising car. I mean, you know, this was designed by a guy called Robert Opron, and this could only have been designed by a Frenchman, really. I mean, look at the shape of these lines here. I mean, how would you arrive at that detail?
I know. It's amazing.
It's beyond me.
I really like that the number plate has its own glass case.
Yeah, which is a beautiful feature.
It's like a museum display just for the number plate.
This was the European car. You know, so this is the pure design. You know, this kind of encasement here, and I guess, you know, this was an aerodynamic design detail. These cars were sold in America, and unfortunately, the federal laws didn't allow this detail to exist. So the cars in America don't have that.
That's a shame, man. It's like an iconic feature of the car.
Yeah, but a really cool thing to point out is that there's quite a lot of these cars in America that you can buy pretty cheaply, and they don't have that design detail, but you can bring them back over here and you can reintroduce that onto them. This is a manual car. It's a carburetor car.
Yeah.
They did automatic, they did fuel injection, but I wanted the carburetor car with the manual gear change. But in actual fact, if I was to buy one again now, just given the fact that it's a car that's really good for cruising in, I would go fuel injection and automatic.
Would you?
Just stop and go. Because you don't need to kind of, you know, it's not a sports car.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a driver's car, as it were.
Yeah, so I think I love this car, and we should definitely consider this for our trip.
100%. I love these details. I mean, I feel that some designers, or at least in this day and age, they'd have just moved those there and made it a straight bonnet.
Yeah.
But here, they've created this wonderful flair around the wipers. It's just cool. It's a stunning
gorgeous
thing.
It's a gorgeous thing. It's a real kind of avant-garde car that people. I think people are slowly starting to appreciate these cars more and more. And if you're going to get one, get a good one, because you don't want to restore one of these cars.
No.
There's so many bits to it.
I will leave that to you. So, since I was last here, this wasn't. What is this? This is also a Zagato variant.
Yeah, so this is a Lancia. It's a Lancia Flaminia. And to give it its full name, it's a Lancia Flaminius Sport, which means it has been bodied by Zagato. Now Zagato were a coach builder that were all about lightness and aerodynamics. They actually started off as an airplane company in the 1920s, and they would take cars that were kind of quite plain, quite regular looking, not necessarily that lightweight or aerodynamic, and they would give them a very slippery shape.
Yeah.
So these are quite rare cars.
Dude, everything in here is quite a rare car.
Yeah, that's true.
So
But this is particular. This
when
is
you're saying
unusual.
rare, like in comparison to number 9 over here,
Yeah.
is that?
Well, they made a few hundred of these, I suppose.
It's still pretty rare then. Wow.
But this car particularly interesting because they went from a Lancia Flaminius Sport to a Lancia Flaminius Super Sport, which had a different body,
Okay.
and it had a bigger engine. It had a 2.8 litre V6 engine. And so this is one of the last Lancia Flaminius Sports, and because it was one of the last ones, it was fitted with the larger engine. So this car is one of 33 Lancia Flaminius Sports with the 2.8 litre engine in it.
How do you find these things, man? Like seriously, have you?
I don't know, I spend a lot of time on the internet.
Is this the, I mean, this doesn't strike me as the kind of thing that's just going to crop up on piston heads. Like
No, so a lot,
how do you find this?
I'd say a lot of my cars have come from America.
Yeah.
I've got a network of friends who kind of spend their lives just looking for interesting cars.
Yeah.
And a lot of my cars I've bought because they have fundamentally been interesting cars, but not necessarily in good condition.
Sure.
Because I like bringing them back to life. I like restoring why they're here,
Yeah.
or using companies that I trust to do them.
So
for me.
you actually do. When he says here, he means here.
Yeah, so I've got a workshop here, and I don't do it so much anymore. But
Yeah.
a few years ago, you'd find me underneath the cars in my overalls, and
That's awesome.
pulling these things apart and then walking away and letting someone else put them back together.
Pretend like you've done something with your careers. Cool.
Yeah. So this is really one of my favourite cars. I think it's Lancia were a company famous for building over-engineered cars, quite sophisticated cars. They spent a lot of money building their cars. Their profit margins weren't great, and ultimately that's why they ended up being bought by Fiat. But just a great story, and of course there's a lot of noise about making Lancia great again.
Absolutely.
There's a whole movement towards kind of embracing just how wonderful they are as cars, and it's kind of it's a connoisseur's car, because people that are really into engineering and into old cars, they all appreciate just how well designed and built Lancias were.
It's a stunning thing. I was about to ask if you have any right-hand drive cars. That is the least likely car that I thought would have a right-hand drive.
Yes,
That's an early Le Mans car?
So that's an Alpine Works car. It was raced at Le Mans in 1968 and in 1969.
So let me just clarify this. You got a Le Mans car with number plates. So you can drive this on the road.
Well, what's brilliant about this car is they didn't make this. So this is an Alpine A220.
Okay.
It has a V8 Gordini engine.
So it sounds absurd.
It doesn't have any kind of silencing on it, so
No.
it's pretty full on. And this was an Alpine Works car.
Wow, that's special.
And unusually, this particular car was the only car that they road registered in period to do road rallies. And so my car is the only A220 that you will ever see driving on the road.
I mean, once again, I don't know where you find this stuff. It's bonkers.
Well, yeah, this was a car that I didn't really know much about until I saw it for sale.
Yeah.
But just instantly
It was just like, wow.
fell in love with
Yeah.
the shape of it. All of the other cars, there's not many A220s, I don't know the number, I think there was maybe 9 or 10 made.
It's funny because from the front, because the lights are so big, the front of the car is so imposing, it looks like a large car, but as soon as you get round the side of it, it sort of shrinks away. It's quite a small car.
It's pretty small, actually. It's pretty small. Now, these cars weren't particularly successful in period. They had a lot of problems because, the engine is, specific to these cars. This Gordini V8 engine, I think they only made 17 of these engines in total,
Right.
of the Gordini V8 engine. And I'm very lucky enough to have a spare one, which is being rebuilt at the moment.
course you do.
You kind of need it. If you're going to take it racing, because engines blow up.
Especially those. Yes, the early ones.
And what's interesting again about this car is all of the cars originally had these kind of side pod radiators, but they quickly realised that wasn't an effective way of cooling the engines. So all of the other cars were modified to a slightly different body shape, which sort of did away with this detail, which I think is really beautiful. So again, this is the only car left in the original configuration, from when they were made.
Yeah, it's a mad thing though, isn't it? Have you actually driven this on?
Well, this
the
car,
road yet?
Because this is quite a special car, and that's a very rare engine. When I bought the car, the engine had some oil pressure problems.
Right.
Running a very high oil pressure, and we don't know why.
Right.
So I decided
to leave it as is.
To just leave it as is. The spare engine is getting rebuilt by a specialist in France.
Okay.
Because you don't want to ruin one of those engines that's just so it's just so rare.
When this is fixed, you should take that to Tesco. That'd be fun.
Well, that's a good idea.
That makes some great content, wouldn't it? Cool. Over to the second half of the man cave. Sure. Okay, so this is the mad machine that I was referring to when we first started filming. Is this the result of an argument with Ferrari?
So this is a Bizzarrini, which is a lesser known Italian mark. Giotto Bizzarrini was a very kind of proficient engineer who was for a long time Ferrari's head engineer, responsible for developing the 250 short wheelbase and the 250 GTO.
Strong CV.
It's a pretty strong CV.
Strong CV. Yeah.
And in the early 60s there was an incident. There was a falling out between Giotto Bizzarrini and some of Ferrari's other kind of top team, which resulted in what's known as the Palace Revolt. So the Palace Revolt was essentially all of Enzo Ferrari's top team walking out as a result of a disagreement and a falling out. And Giotto Bizzarrini left Ferrari and essentially went on to create this car, which started off life as an Iso Grifo, but then he took the rights to that Iso Grifo and badged it as a Bizzarrini.
Right, wow.
So it's an Italian car powered by an American Corvette engine. So Giotto Bizzarrini didn't have the funds or the time to build his own engine, even though he was very capable of doing so. And he loved the Corvette engine, so he decided that was the power plant that he was going to put in his car. And these cars were raced at Le Mans. You will have seen them whizzing around Goodwood at the men's meet.
I saw one a few days back, actually.
They made about 100 of these Bizzarrini Stradas, which means the street going version of the race car. The Corsas were the racing version. And unusually it's kind of a front mid-engine, so the engine actually sits very far back in this car, and in actual fact that little panel in there is where you adjust the timing.
Is it really?
Yeah, you have to adjust the distributors from inside the car because the engine comes so far back.
Wow. Which really for its time is quite forward thinking, because we make a big deal of, even take the F12 now. They made a pretty big deal of how far back they put it and how low it was.
Yeah, well, he saw that to make a car handle well, you want to have as much kind of equal weight distribution as possible. So he pushed it really far back in the car. So it's kind of unusual, very early front mid-engined.
It's odd because we were chatting earlier that it looks like it may have even started life as a rear-engine car.
Well, proportionally it looks strange because it's got a very low frontal area, so it's quite surprising that they've actually managed to squeeze an engine in there, but it does actually look like it should have the engine.
I mean, come and check this out. I mean, considering that this is a front-engine car, there's just this disproportionate void of space there, which we think is probably half fuel tank as well. But normally, if you were to see a layout like that, it would definitely have an engine in it. So it's a mad shape, but design-wise, it's outstanding.
And these were very successful racing cars as well. And it drives well. It's got a good ride. It's got great power. It makes a great noise. It's got that kind of classic kind of V8 burble as you're going down the road. The only thing that I don't like about it so much is because it's a left hooker, the visibility, there's a lot of blind spots in the car, so if you're kind of behind a truck and you need to overtake it, you can't really see if there's anything coming. But this is probably one of the most exotic looking cars I think ever made. I mean, this was kind of, this is quite often referred to as the GTO Mark II, because essentially he was highly responsible for the development of the GTO. And this is essentially the car that he went on to make immediately after that.
Crikey.
So it's got really good racing credentials, and from an engineering point of view it's very advanced. And from a styling point of view, it's just such an unusual thing,
isn't it? Yeah. This as well has just been rebuilt pretty much from ground up.
Yeah, this is a car which has been completely restored. It was a body off restoration. When I bought the car, everything was original about it, but it had just, it had a pretty hard life, and because it's an aluminium body, the only way to restore it properly is to remove the skins from the body and to restore it all properly. I actually took this car to Livorno, where it was originally produced, and met Giotto Bizzarini.
You're kidding.
Who was, I think, in his 80s at the time. I think he might be in his 90s now. And he was so happy to see this car.
Yeah. Incredible, man. It's stunning. And you've had a little camera installed back there.
Because I was so uncomfortable with the overtaking and the blind spots, we put a little camera on the back bumper which links up to that screen there, so I can drive the car with a degree of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, purists might be like, "Oh my god, what are you doing?" But it's better than putting it up the side.
I'm a huge purist. Everything has to be restored exactly as it was when it left the factory. But
it stays pure if you don't crash it. So that's a good move.
Exactly.
Then. Yeah.
You've got to feel safe driving them.
And then this is the car that we might be doing our road trip on.
Yeah.
So Centauri later on in the year.
We might be driving this across Italy.
That'll be cool.
Unless we decide we want a bit more comfort. So this is a 1967 Porsche 911S.
So this is the first S.
This is the first S.
Yeah.
So very quickly, I think Porsche realised that they could sell cars to a slightly different customer by offering a high performance version of it, which is of course a model that is used
the test of time.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of the first high performance 911 that was made as a production car, and really all they did was they put in slightly hotter camshafts, high compression pistons, and that upped the output of the engine. I think they had slightly different brakes. The wheels were introduced, the Fuchs here were introduced as a 911S feature, which is of course a kind of an iconic,
super iconic
design. And that's about all they did.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of felt that in order to charge more money for that, they needed to spruce up the interior. So here's an interesting detail. If you spent more money on a 911S, you got that little bit of chrome on the end there.
Are you kidding me? That was it.
That is a 911S option. So I think that helps them justify charging you. That's thousands of pounds more for. Wow. So there's lots of little details which make a 911 into a 911S, but
and of course the incredibly safe lap belt.
Yes,
that's awesome.
Safety is kind of notional.
Check this out. I think this is the kind of thing you might tie up your dog outside a shop with.
Or not even.
Not even that. Yeah, like it's good bit of leather there for you. It's might have to drive across Italy with this, but it'll be alright.
Do you know what? If we do it in this, I think I'll
get some harnesses rigged in.
Probably make something a bit more significant.
That's cool. We actually went for a drive in this car a few days ago, and it is cool. It's gorgeous.
They're great cars. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's just such an iconic car.
It's
It's about
comfortable.
150 horsepower,
But it
weighs
feels
a lot
nothing.
more.
Yeah.
It weighs nothing. It sounds like you're, you know, doing 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But,
That is cool. Actually, in the comments, it'll be interesting to see if you guys would like to see the journey in this or in the Citroen SM, the big baller car. Let's see. Yeah, comments below.
Citroen
Let's
or
know.
911.
Citroen or 911. I mean, I never thought those words would come out of my mouth, but let's see.
But you know, we've kind of what we're choosing between is comfort and noise and discomfort in this car.
Yes.
Really. So,
Okay. Yeah.
I've got a feeling.
Let's see.
I've got a feeling which way it's going to go.
might take the Citroen.
But this was a car. You know, it's an original black car, which is quite a rare colour for Porsches. And again, this car came from America in a pretty bad way, and it was restored. It's all matching numbers, and it's all original.
Fantastic.
The seats, you know, this is called. This is like a black and white pepita insert. That's the kind of the name for that fabric, which is kind of just a typical
And was
Porsche
it
interior.
Tuthill that did
Tuthill did this
the
car
work
for
on
me,
it?
and they're great. You know, they're used
Yeah.
to kind of making cars just go well.
Yeah.
And what I love about this car is you get in it and it just works.
That is a great thing about Porsche. You could just rely. How reliable do you think the Citroen will be?
That's actually pretty
Alright.
reliable.
Yeah, even though it has an old Italian engine in it, not an old French one in it.
Yeah,
It'll be
for
alright.
some reason that is a reliable
Yeah,
car,
it's
even
cool.
though it's full of complicated technology. It
Yeah.
kind of that will get us
Early
there.
quirks,
That'll
yeah.
get us
Cool.
there.
All right. Thanks for the garage tour, man.
Pleasure.
Very
Thanks for
impressive
coming.
stuff. I
Thank
want to come
you.
again with some more stuff.
Anytime you want,
More
and if you
cars.
want to take a car for a drive, we can do that.
I think at the beginning of this we said we were going to do the Modern Classic series on said Veyron.
So we'll do
would
that,
be cool.
for sure.
That would be special. We're going to have a full-blown chat with the Road Rat team. So I'm going to put the link below to that video because it was intended to be part of this video, but we got so involved in it that it became somewhat of a podcast. So yeah, go and check that out. Guy's Instagram account is also linked below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.